Starts with a slight fever, dryness of the throat. As the virus penetrates the red blood cells, the victim becomes dizzy, begins to experience an itching, a rash. From there, the poison goes to work on the central nervous system, causing severe muscle spasms, followed by the inevitable drooling. At this point, the entire digestive system collapses, accompanied by uncontrollable flatulence, until finally the poor bastard is reduced to a quivering, wasted piece of jelly.
Hi, I'm Dr. Zavala. Welcome to our video. I have a question for you. Do you have a killer in your kitchen? And who is this silent killer? The answer comes from analyzing who the players are in causing us to be getting more fat, more sick, and how can we identify this killer? The killer is disguised in so many forms, shapes, color, taste, and names. I want to start with the main player, the food industry. The food industry has grown in power since our first years in the 1900s to become one of the most powerful industries in the world. And of course, the goal, like any other corporation, is to make profits. Sadly, at least from my point of view, this has happened at the expense of our health. And who's the other big player? The pharmaceutical companies, the drug companies. They have been growing in power exponentially. They have much more influence on our media, our government, and they are supporting the food companies in pretending to cure the illnesses and the consequences of the type of food that we eat on a daily basis. Sadly, the US government has been participant in this problem, mostly because of the tremendous influences of both the food and the pharmaceutical companies in regards to pretty much saying whatever they are paid to say to support the growth and power of these corporations. And the more sad of all of these issues is what I think is that the influence of the food industry, the pharmaceutical industry has in our medical societies, the ones that theoretically should be helping us to counteract all the problems that these big corporations create. Just an example, the giant Procter & Gamble that created Crisco that I mentioned in the previous video, pretty much launched the American Heart Association. That was really a tremendous blow to the independence of our medical societies in regards to advising the public in what is best for us. I mentioned something already in a previous video that you can have a link shown here. And who is the star in this video? Is the vegetable oil industry. The heavy advertising for the food companies with the support of the medical societies really pretty much made us change the way we eat from using predominantly animal fats during the pretty much our whole history as humans until the early 1900s, when progressively the amount of vegetable oils were introduced and we at the same time started to decrease the amount of animal fats that we were eating. As I mentioned before, the American Heart Association was a big part of this, mentioning their advertisements that we should stop eating animal fats. They demonized animal fats, pretending that the cholesterol diet hypothesis that related to heart disease with higher cholesterol levels would be managed by lowering our cholesterol content in the blood. That has never been proven, and at the same time avoiding us from eating all these animal fats that were the mainstay of our food supply before this happened. The intense campaigns from the American Heart Association, later on joined by the American Diabetes Association, from many medical societies, supporting the food industry claims that animal fats were unhealthy for us, obviously made the public react to this, and with the fear that was instilled in us in regards to the growing epidemic of heart disease that was occurring early in the 1900s, peaking in the 1950s, all this supported by the big media blitz of President Eisenhower having problems with his heart.
His popularity all over the globe was at an extraordinary peak when he was suddenly stricken by a heart attack in Denver. The whole world watched anxiously as he rallied and recovered. When he returned to Washington, he received a heartwarming welcome.
The American public just responded. The reality is there was already, back then, early in the 1930s and 50s, clear evidence that all this about animal fats was just a creation made to emphasize in the public the idea that we should start using vegetable oils. Just to get you an idea, animal fats are very expensive to produce. They are very good for us, but they are not as productive in regards to money as vegetable oils. Vegetable oils can be produced in tremendous quantities with almost no cost. As I mentioned, documented scientific evidence of these being harmful was evident since the 1960s. Yes, there were studies that showed it lowered cholesterol, but increased cancer rates. There's even evidence that increased the incidence of gallstones. There's a study, for example, in Japanese men that with a reduction in cholesterol less than 180 milligrams per deciliter had a relationship with liver cirrhosis. So what is the reality between consuming saturated fat that comes predominantly from animal sources? Also, there's other sources that are vegetable. So what is the difference between saturated fats and polyunsaturated? In chemical terms, it's just a double bond. As you remember in basic chemistry, just a carbon has 4 connections, and usually the carbons are attached to hydrogen molecules. When we have a double bond, we just eliminate one hydrogen, and that's a chemical difference for those of you that like organic chemistry. But the reality is that this little change in chemical structure has tremendous changes in regards to the effects these unsaturated fats, now called polyunsaturated fats because they have many double bonds in their chain, but the changes it has in our body are tremendous. For example, you have all heard about the benefits of omega-3 fatty acids. Those are the ones that you eat in your sardines, your mackerel, your salmon, fish oils. And this is what also is called alpha-linolenic acid. The higher concentration of omega-6, that is linoleic acid, as you can see, is the balance between omega-3s and omega-6, what causes us to have more or less inflammatory process. And as most of you already know, all these chronic medical conditions are all related to chronic inflammation. Inflammation is very important for us when we have trauma, when we undergo surgery, when we have an infection. We need to respond to whatever is causing us problems, and we do that by triggering an inflammatory response. But when this inflammation is prolonged and without a specific insult to our bodies, then it becomes harmful and is the main reason for all the development of the chronic medical conditions that I will discuss later. Now, what are the sources of these omega-6 fatty acids that now in our diet are up to 70% of what we consume in our diets? And the main source is the vegetable oils. Vegetable is a misnomer. They should be called really seed oil. The different concentrations of omega-6 fatty acids are from almost no omega-6s in saturated fat, in the fat you get from eating meat, for example, to very high content of omega-6s in most vegetable oils except canola oil that has other issues that I will mention. But still, this ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids is very significant to decrease our chances of developing a medical condition, a chronic medical condition. Now, I mentioned already canola oil, and again, I mentioned it has a great omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, but the story here is way more complicated. Just to give you an idea of the ideal ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 is a 3-to-1. The current diets that we're consuming, mostly because we're eating so much vegetable oil, are about 17-to-1. So if the polyunsaturated fat is so bad and gets even worse when we heat it, why are we consuming it in such a large quantity? And again, I mention it's because of powerful interests that we have mentioned and have promoted the demonization of animal fat, creating fear, hysteria, misinformation in the public. And why? Because polyunsaturated hydrogenated oil has become the backbone of the food industry. If you go to your supermarket, you will see that probably 80-90% of every food item you want to buy has a list of ingredients. And that list of ingredients, if you analyze it carefully, it will have vegetable oils. So that tells you one very simple thing. processed foods and ultra-processed foods are one big source for these oils. We don't have to just fry with these oils. We can eat it in our cookies, our desserts, our bread, and every item we consume that is processed. Now, are there alternatives to these vegetable oils that are not animal-based? For those of you that just don't want for moral reasons to consume animal products, yes. For example, we have the palm and the coconut oil that have high saturated fat content and are very low in polyunsaturated fats. So as you can see, it's very difficult for the average consumer to see where they are getting all these vegetable oils from, because it comes in pretty much everything that has a list of ingredients. Just to give you a very interesting finding that I checked, the way we fatten rats in the lab for diverse medical experiments is using Crisco together with sugar. And the rats become more obese, and then we can perform all sorts of different scientific experiments. Well, if you check how most donut products are made, it's exactly the same, sugar and Crisco. So why are we getting fat? I think that's pretty obvious. Now, during the Industrial Revolution in the 1900s, we needed a lot of oil to power our manufacturing plants. Our engines needed oil. Initially, we sadly used whale oil that we almost exterminated.
It's by the light of spermaceti lamps that great authors like Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson and Jane Austen write their greatest works. During the 1800s, it's spermaceti oil that lubes the steam engines and locomotives of the Industrial Revolution. And it was still used in the gearboxes of American automatic cars up until 1972. And because it stays liquid even at sub-zero temperatures, an urban myth took root that it was used in the Apollo 11 mission to land on the moon.
And there was a need to develop different sources of oil for our manufacturing process. And that's when the industry started to use seed oils as alternative. Initially, the cotton seed was extremely abundant, very cheap, and it became the main seed oil, not only for the industry, but also for the production of soaps, candles, etc. That's when Procter & Gamble, that developed Crisco, started to see that there was a need to use this cotton seed in something else than just the industry. And that's when the edible seed oils were developed. And how are these seed oils or vegetable oils produced? The process is very different between the different types of oils, but I will briefly describe the canola oil production. That is one of the most common that we use, and is one that advertises that have a great omega-3 to omega-6 ratio that is really not the whole story.
Canola oil is one of the healthiest cooking oils. Compared to olive, sunflower, and soybean oils, it has the lowest level of saturated fat, 7%. It also contains more healthy omega-3 fatty acids and is high in monounsaturated fat, which lowers cholesterol.
Remember, during World War II, Canada helped the Allies in the United States that were in a tremendous need to have enough oil for the production of warships, planes, and all the military industrial complex. So Canada came up with the production of Canola oil, Canada Oil Low Acid. That's the abbreviation of canola oil. The help was tremendous. That's what made the Allies and the United States prevail in the Second World War. But when the war ended, the need for this canola oil was not there anymore. So, like entrepreneurs are always, you have to change your customer base if you want to continue using your product. And that's when the tremendous increase in the consumption of seed oils happened, because that oil had to be used. And the industrial production of this oil is quite interesting. It requires heating the oil to tremendous high temperatures, crushing the seed. Almost all canola oil, commercial canola oil, is then extracted using a chemical called hexane, that is recovered at the end of the production, of the processing. And the rancid mixture has to be steamed again at high temperatures to eliminate bad odors. It has to be bleached to remove the gray color, winterized for stability, and then finally artificial colors and synthetic vitamins are added. After watching how these oils were produced, I really changed my mind about eating or consuming these oils at all. I don't know what you think about this, but it's pretty gruesome how you can pretty much compare how petroleum, gasoline is produced and how vegetable oils are produced. Of course, all this is bad for us. No, there are other many uses for vegetable oil, like the production of biodiesel that makes a relatively clean combustion product for many different uses. But for human consumption, I really think that it's very likely not the best choice for us. What are the main consequences of using these seed oils in our kitchen? And of course, in every restaurant we eat. These oils, when heated, and that is what we use them for, frying, cooking, etc., they produce toxic oxidation products. Just ask any restaurant employee that has the ugly task of cleaning the deep fryers at the end of the day, how much junk is there. These free radical oxidative products produced with the consumption of seed oils, mostly when they are heated, that's what we're eating them, contribute to pretty much all the chronic medical conditions that affect humanity and has been rapidly growing in number and severity, and for which we really do not have efficient ways of controlling it, despite the many treatments the pharmaceutical companies or industry sells us. A specific problem with these oils is that the oxidation of the bad cholesterol, you all heard about the LDL, low density lipoprotein, when it is oxidized predominantly by consuming high carbohydrate diets that glycates the LDL, and on the other hand, consuming vegetable oil that oxidizes the LDLs, that's when the LDL really becomes a pathologic LDL. The native LDL does not have the power to damage our arteries. The oxidized or glycated LDL causes problems. By itself, I want to emphasize that cholesterol levels, including LDL levels, now are being obviously not linked to heart disease or many other problems. The other part of the problem is that the food industry is excellent at making all their processed food very addictive, so that we really crave eating them. And just see that everything with an ingredients label pretty much has the same issue. A list of 10, 15, 20 ingredients, many of which you don't even know what they are. They have many different names, but they all come to the main sources of all our problems. In some way, sugars, carbohydrates, fructose, that is part of these carbohydrates, and seed oil. Pretty much no processed food is absent from these. Just go to a fast food restaurant and you will see the consequences of this unparalleled greed by the food companies to become more and more powerful at our expense. We're just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and as I mentioned in a previous video, that really probably is not our fault. We're just following what our medical societies, our food companies, our pharmaceutical companies are telling us, and we're just getting sicker and sicker. The tremendous amounts of vegetable oils or seed oils we consume are directly correlated to our obesity epidemic, the chronic medical conditions epidemic, and in these chronic medical conditions you can see increase in cancer, increase in heart disease, increase in diabetes, increases in obesity, increase in depression, increase in rheumatic or arthritic conditions, increase in degenerative neurological conditions like multiple sclerosis. All these related, if you see the different studies, to the increase in consumption of very, very refined products, all containing seed oils. So the polyunsaturated healthy oils story, as per our medical authorities, are obviously the reason for these raising problems and the raising omega-6s that we are consuming. This is even documented in fat biopsies of people that are checked by see how much omega-6s they have in their fat, and this has grown exponentially over the many years. Are there examples in our current world where people that are not following this type of toxic diets are doing better? We have examples nowadays that can probably prove or be part of the proof that eating in a different way makes us stay healthier. You can see, for example, the Maasai tribe in Kenya and Tanzania, that really their diet is pretty much milk, meat, and blood. They consume a high amount of calories, about 3,000 calories a day, and 66% of their diet is animal fat, with only 17% of carbohydrates and 1.7% of omega-6 fatty acids. And just look at them. No heart disease, no chronic medical conditions. They are lean, fit, strong, and that's all they consume. Other great example is the inhabitants of the Canola Islands in the South Pacific. They consume most of their calories, up to 60%, from coconut and coconut oil. That is coconut oil, 91 to 94% saturated fat. And only 2% of their diet is polyunsaturated fatty acid. And in 1982, a study showed that 0% of men up to 70 years of age had a previous heart problem. There was virtually no diabetes, no obesity, and of course, there was nobody fat. Compare this to what we consume in our standard American diet. We follow the advice of eating healthy polyunsaturated oils and look at how we look in our society. Of course, our doctors tell us that's the way we should eat. So the healthy traditional population that I mentioned, and there are many others like the Inuit in the Arctic, also eating just pretty much saturated fats, they have a common denominator. What do these healthy populations do not have? They don't consume refined sugar, no refined wheat, no processed foods, and mostly no vegetable oils. So how do we confront this challenge? We're being attacked by pretty much everybody: food industry, pharmaceutical industry, government, medical societies, the media. I think it's pretty simple. I follow that in my personal diet and in my family and friends. How can we just consume maybe 1% of omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acid? Number one, obviously don't buy these oils. Don't use soybean oil, don't use corn oil, don't use safflower oil, don't use canola oil, and many others. Don't have in your pantry any processed food. When you go to your supermarket, avoid the middle aisles. That's where all the processed foods are accumulated. Very tasty, great, but not good for us. And then try to avoid the use of fast food in your life. Don't go to fast food restaurants. Now, you want to go to restaurants. That's a great thing to do. It's very, very good for our well-being in regards to being able to socialize. But when you go to a good restaurant, just request that whatever food you are going to eat is not fried. Try to eat grilled steaks, for example, or cooked items like fish, shellfish, and request that if they are going to serve you mostly in a higher end restaurant, just make sure that they cook with butter or avocado oil. That's another good choice, that if they don't have it, then probably at least the butter they should be able to have. Now in your house, I would advise to try to get avocado oil. That's cold pressed avocado oil. There are some brands that are mixed with other stuff that you shouldn't get, but there's very good avocado oils. Most of those avocados are coming from Mexico, and they are processed in a cold pressed manner, and the first press is the one that gives you the best avocado oil. There are some brands that have these characteristics, but the other option is saturated fats like butter, ghee, coconut, lard, tallow, and olive oil for salads. Now, if you're going to cook with olive oil, just keep your temperatures low, because otherwise it gets oxidized. And keep your oils in dark glass container. That's the best way to do it. And just a reminder, check your temperature when you are cooking. When you overheat any oil, it will get oxidized. And a brief guide is available on the internet of what the different temperatures are. Avocado oil, for example, has a 500-degree temperature to start getting oxidized, so that's pretty much you can fry anything in it. And then coconut oil has only about 350 degrees, so it's probably lower, a little higher risk that you can get it oxidized. And the extra virgin olive oil has a temperature of only 320, so not the best oil for cooking. Now, how simple can this be? Well, try to cook at home. I know it seems like a tough chore, but it's the best and the only real way to avoid the long-term consequences of eating the way we're eating. And there's so many simple ways of doing it. Just get a nice grill and you can grill your own meat in 10-15 minutes, so it's really not such a big deal. Now in our next video, I will discuss with you the most prevalent health concerns in our society and how to confront it with or without the help from your doctor. Thanks for your attention, and if you think this video can help you or your family and friends, please just share it. And also remember, if you can click on the I like this video, it will help us to spread the word more and help more people to confront this horrible epidemic we're facing. Thank you.
You'd better tell the captain we've got to land as soon as we can. This woman has to be gotten to a hospital.
A hospital? What is it?
It's a big building with patients, but that's not important right now. Tell the captain I must speak to him.
Certainly.